Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. This time, let's build the NuNU Audi Sport Quattro S1 in 1/24th scale. As always, I start with building the body because it takes the longest time to finish. I start by cutting off the supporting sprue, then clean off the sprue gate. Then I try to smooth out the parting line with 800 grit sanding paper. Here I use my homemade sanding tool to get a sharp edge when sanding. I also sand the whole body to provide some tooth for the primer to stick on. Since I'm using the super detailing parts, so I have to trim off the mold-on hood pins. And then with a puncher, I marked the location of the hood pin and then drill a hole to indicate where the photo etch part should go in the future. And then I deepen all the recessed panel lines with an engraver. This is my favorite engraver, and it's made by Quattro. Quattro is the mother company of Mr. Color, and they have a name change a few years ago, and it's actually not called Gunzi anymore, it's called Quattro's. Anyways, this engraver has different thickness of tips which you can get. This one I'm using is 0.2 millimeters, and it's very sharp and make engraving a much simpler job. I always start engraving at the middle of the panel lines and end at where the two lines joins. I just find it better that way. But then again, I'll do it differently sometimes. And here is a good demonstration where I should have started in the middle of the panel line. For this particular kit, the panel line of the trunk must be rescribed. Then I sand the whole body off with a fine grit sanding sponge. This will provide some tooth for the primer to stick on. And then in the area where it needs a smooth surface, I use my cheap sanding stick from China. And then finish it with a fine grit sanding sponge. I use my sanding tool for absolute flat surface, and then I stick sanding paper to Tamiya's paint stirrer to get into tight and hard to reach areas. And then I tape sanding paper around a wooden dowel to clean up the parting line on the wheel arches. And for the even tighter and smaller area, I use a file to clean up the parting lines. Then I test fit the bumpers and then clean them up with sanding or filing whenever it's needed. I also try to clean up and smooth out the joining area as much as possible when test fitting. And then I start test fitting the front grille. I also sand and clean up the parts as much as possible to ensure a fine, good fit. Now I'm sure the parts will fit nicely even after painting. Now the body is ready for priming. And here is how I hold my car body for spray painting. I found these juice bottles from my local convenience store, and it's made with glass. I empty out the juice and fill the bottle with water and seal the cap with hot glue. Because it's bottom heavy, it provides a very sturdy stand for painting. For the other parts, I use my homemade clips on wooden chopsticks. And for the primer, I use my favorite Mr. Servicer and thin it with leveling thinner. I always keep old bottles for thinning paint. And here I'm transferring thick paint into the old bottle for thinning. I mix up the paint well with Tamiya's paint stirrer. And when you see the paint straining down from the stirrer, the paint is too thick. So I transfer the paint onto the old bottle, and I clean the bottle really well before I close it up. And then I start thinning the paint in the old bottle. And when you see the paint start dripping down nicely and have a milk consistency, it's ready for spraying. Well, I always test before I do anything. And I use anti-static brush to clean off the body and then start spraying the servicer. I'll do a few light coat and wait for it to dry before I do a heavy wet coat. I usually set my spraying pressure from 15 psi to 20 psi. Well, instead of showing spraying and drying, which is the same process over and over again, and here I have already let the primer dry for a day and then sand along the parting line area to ensure the body is smooth and the parting line is not seen anymore. I also glued the bumper to the body and sand smooth along the jointing area. I drilled out the rivets on the bumpers, which I will replace them with metal ones after finishing the body. Well, I finished part 1 of the build here, and thank you for watching. Until next time, bye bye.